All right, everybody, welcome into Patriots Postgame Live. KJ Doyle doing the postgame shows this season. Like we did the Celtics postgame shows, they had so much success, we decided to do some Patriots postgame shows. So as some of you may have known, if you caught the streams, caught any of the podcasts, we announced this a few weeks ago, I was going to be doing postgame streams. And I was hoping that the first one was going to be a good one. And towards the end, it looked like that was going to be the case. It looked like the Patriots were in position to get at least a field goal there. And yeah, they were running the ball with Damian Harris. Harris was having a pretty good game. He had the big run to start things off, and then the rest of his runs, started to get less spectacular as the game went on. But he was okay, and the Patriots, offense wasn't running on all cylinders, but things were looking okay. Things were looking good enough, should have been good enough to get the win. You're in position to kick the field goal late, and they fumble. And that's just the story of the game. It reminds me of last year's game against the Bills, where the Patriots looked like they were driving and potentially in position to win the game, and Cam Newton fumbled. And that was one of the plays that I look back on last season, and I think about Cam Newton, and I think about getting rid of him and moving on to Mac Jones. That was one of the plays where I look at and say, I'm just comforted by knowing something like that probably won't happen this season. That you'll have, at the very least, you have a rookie quarterback, he might make some rookie mistakes, but you're not going to run into that issue. Mac Jones is going to be running on, 3rd and 8 or whatever it was and trying to get the first down and fumbling. Unfortunately, it was Damian Harris. So instead of a field goal there, you get back on defense and you can't stop the run, which was one of the things that I really thought the Patriots were going to be great at this year, and they weren't terrible at it today, but when it mattered most, they couldn't get the job done. And so that's incredibly frustrating. That, the fumble's frustrating enough. The fact that you couldn't get a stop is frustrating in its own right as well. So, you do all that. You don't go through all these hoops. You elevate Nick Folk from the practice squad. You're right there, and Damian Harris just can't fumble there. And I know that Damian Harris is someone that has a lot of potential. And if you watched the show where Colin Canada and I went through our top 5 most important Patriots for this season, Damian Harris was 3rd and 4th on our respective lists. Like, we think he is up there in terms of importance to this offense. And it showed today. He was very important today. I mean, 100 yards, he was clearly a focal point for them. And he's clearly their number one back. And you could argue, along with Mac Jones, who I'll get to, because Mac Jones, I'll get into the day Mac Jones had, but Damian Harris, he was the guy who was making that offense go, and he deserves a lot of credit for I don't mean just a lot of credit, but he has a lot of responsibility on his shoulders for making sure the offense is running smoothly, because you could argue he's their best offensive weapon. You could make that argument over Jonnu Smith and over Hunter Henry, who we also need to talk about. So the fact that he's the guy to fumble there, it's unacceptable. And I think that if it wasn't for the fact that this guy fumbled early in the game, you might look at it and say, well, we have Ramondre Stevenson and there's hope there, and maybe he also fumbled and the Patriots lost it. They had 4 fumbles today. 2 of them they lost. That's never going to cut it. So that's very disappointing from Damian Harris, very discouraging that he would be the guy to make that mistake and really cost them the game. That was the game, because if they, if Tua was getting a little bit, Tua was pretty good all day. He was getting a little bit shaky, obviously through that pick, in the 4th quarter, and it seemed like things were going in the direction where Tua was trending down. He was, he started off hot. He had the rushing touchdown. Had the pass to, I think in the 3rd quarter, he had the pass to Waddle. Nothing after that. So, could Tua have driven the field and gotten Miami in field goal range? And maybe, but at least you had the chance to get your defense out there and you put your defense in position to stop them. And unfortunately, instead what happens is you just give Miami the ball back. You can't stop the run. The game's over. And I don't think the Patriots desperately needed Stephon Gilmore today. I think he definitely would have helped. It's not like they gave up. They were giving up yards through the air left and right. Tua was pretty good. I think do they win the game if Stephon Gilmore's out there? Yeah, they probably do. But I don't think it was dire. It's just when you have a team like Miami and they have 2 fairly young, dynamic wide receivers in Devontae Parker and Jalen Waddle. Obviously, Will Fuller's out, so he doesn't factor into that. But I think that obviously a guy like Stephen Gilmore helped. Jalen Mills made a great play in the game too, but ultimately this loss falls on the shoulders of Damian Harris. He, as much as he did all game long to put the Patriots in a position to end up winning the game, you can't fumble there. And it's unfortunate that he ends up costing Mac Jones what would have been a great win for Mac Jones, because, he comes out, obviously the Patriots get the benefit of that roughing the passer calls that leads to his first touchdown. So you got a little bit of luck there with the officiating, which it made it feel like, okay, you should be able to take advantage of that and win the game. And I'm not saying that call shouldn't have been made. I think it was a fine call. When you get any roughing the passer calls like that are always, always frustrating for the teams that they get called on. So, to be fair to the Dolphins and, the sport and everything like that, if that was called against the Patriots, everybody would be complaining. So the Patriots get a fortunate call there, sets them up for the touchdown. Nice little throw from Mac Jones to Nelson Aglor. Nothing too special, but, boom, he gets in. And all game, Mac Jones played really well, I thought, especially for his first game in the NFL. You look at Trevor Lawrence threw 2 picks today. Zach Wilson wasn't that great. I don't know what his stat line was, but I know the Jets lost pretty handily to Sam Darnold and the Panthers. So, among rookie quarterbacks, he probably had the best performance. I know Trey Lance got a snap at least, but then threw the touchdown, but I wouldn't count him. And so, one of his best passes was, I think it was that 3rd down wheel route to James White, where he just dropped it in the bucket. And the interesting thing about that pass was it was a timing route, and he timed it up perfectly. And I'm not going to say the name. I'm not going to say the name everybody's thinking of. But when you, as a quarterback, can make those kind of plays and, put some arc on the ball, some air under a ball, and put it in a position where your receiver can just run and stride right under it, and you're talking about that ball lofting in the air for 4 or 5 seconds, and just the perfect placement for that ball, like that was special, lethal kind of stuff. And when he has that kind of pinpoint accuracy on a throw like that, where White wasn't wide open, it gets me excited. So Mac Jones overall really good. I think he had over 70% completion percentage, the 1 touchdown, no picks, almost 300 yards. I think it was around 280. So Mac Jones was really good. And unfortunately, I think the Patriots probably should have utilized the tight ends more. I think it was mentioned on the broadcast a few times. And you pay all this money at the position, and certainly, they didn't for tight ends. They didn't have bad days. Tight ends don't get a lot of receptions, but they didn't find the end zone. And the Patriots struggled a lot in the red zone. So you would have liked to see them utilize what should have been a mismatch somewhere. No team in the NFL should be able to cover Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. Okay, you might have a team that has a few guys that can cover one or the other. Okay, if you run into a team with a great safety, like maybe you're playing the Chargers and you got Derwin James on them, or whoever you want to say among the great safeties in the league, Tyrann Mathieu. If there's a safety that you want to put on the tight end that could hold his own at least, but there's no team in the NFL that should have 2 guys that can cover those guys. So the fact that they couldn't take advantage of that more was very disappointing. Like, that should be the focal point of their offense, is just hit you with these tight ends they have. And Devin Asiasi, throw him in there too. Like, if you want to go 3 tight end sets like the Ravens do and just pass out of it, that's what they should be doing. And I was disappointed we didn't see more of that. Another note, Nelson Aglor, I wanted to touch on. Nelson Aglor, I thought he was really good today. I thought Aglor, I don't want to go too far with it, but I think that you look at what he is compared to most of what you had last season, like, clearly a definitive upgrade. I don't know still that he was worth the contract they paid him, but we'll ultimately see. That'll bear through over the course of the season, but definitely an upgrade based on what they had there. So that's a positive as well. I wish I could focus more on these positives, because it feels like there are positive things to take from the games. I think Mac Jones' performance is a positive. I think that Nelson Aguilar's performance is a positive. But I think overall the defense didn't play outstanding, but they weren't terrible. And it's, ultimately it's not enough, and you have to focus on the fact that they lost their 0-1. This should have been, I don't want to say an easy win, but it really felt like you needed to win this week to get your momentum going forward, and try to get something rolling so that you can eventually make the playoffs this year. And I think a lot of people were expecting playoffs or bust. That there's this kind of mentality here that the Patriots spent all this money and they're done with Cam Newton, and now it's the new era again. You need to make the playoffs, and I think that's true in a sense in terms of, the fact that yes, it'd be great to make the playoffs, and you kind of need to from from the standpoint of the vision of your team and everything that's going on with Tom Brady, of course, and what he did with the Buccaneers. You need to make it for your reputation's sake. But really, this Vegas going into the season had the Patriots as not making the playoffs. They were more likely to miss the playoffs than make the playoffs. So the fact that they did, unfortunately fall today, and it's looking like, I don't want to say it's looking like anything because it's week 1. Who knows what's going to happen the rest of the season. But the fact that if they don't make the playoffs, nobody should be shocked. But I think there's this feeling that they have to. It would be some huge disappointment if they didn't. And yes, they spent a lot of money in free agency and all this stuff. But if you look at the history of the teams that spend the most money in free agency, not all of them make the playoffs. It just doesn't work out that way. So I don't even think I could look it up now, but I don't think it's very high at all. I think that most of the teams don't. I know, Drew, you had something in the comments. I think they mismanaged timeouts at the end of the game. It seemed like all the strengths, running backs, run D, situation football, all faltered today. Bright day for Mac. And that's an interesting way to look at it because it does feel kind of like that it was almost reversed. Like you expected the passing game to have to come along a little bit. And you expected, Mac Jones to kind of take his lumps and stuff like that. And you expected Jalen Mills to struggle. And Jalen Mills, he took his lumps, but he wasn't horrible. But the strength of your team, what the strength your team is supposed to be, wasn't there. The front seven was supposed to be much improved with Matthew Judon, with Dante Hightower coming back, with if you want to throw the draft pick of Christian Barrymore in there, you can do that too. And it didn't really feel like they were true to what they did. And I don't want to say the running game was terrible. I mean, Damian Harris did have over 100 yards. But as I mentioned, he basically, he had that huge run to start the game. I think it was 31 yards or something. And it didn't, he ended up just kind of not doing much else after that, at least as far as big games are expected. So really quickly, I found this article. This goes back to 2016, actually. But I'll throw it up now. Let's see if I can get it on a split screen for you guys to kind of go through this. Let's see. I don't know how this is going to look, but we'll try it out. So the biggest spenders in free agency by year. And let me share this specifically. So this is actually going back a few years because this is just the way the article is. Shout out to Fox Sports. But the 2016 Jaguars spent big, went from a 5-11 season, went 3-13. So the next year they kind of bounced back and had their big year, but that took a year of development, a year of growth. So the fact that they did have this kind of, they did have a resurgence where they went to the AFC Championship game, but it took a year, and maybe it'll take a year with the Patriots. The New York Jets, 10-6. I think that was the year they missed the playoffs barely with Fitzpatrick. So again, like if you want to expect the Patriots to go, 11-6, 10-7, that's great. They might still miss the playoffs with a record like that. So playoffs is not guaranteed, and this is a great example with the Jets where they had a pretty good season, but they didn't make the playoffs. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, way back in 2014, went from 4-12 to 2-14. So not great there. It doesn't look like none of their acquisitions were huge, but they spent the most money. Miami Dolphins, 7-9 to 8-8. So, and Tampa Bay Buccaneers again, 4-12 to 7-19. So it doesn't always work out the way you want it to. And I don't know that you can necessarily guarantee, or you definitely can't guarantee that the Patriots are going to make the playoffs this season just because they spent a lot of money. And I've seen a lot of people trying to make that claim that, the Patriots spent all this money in free agency, so if they don't make the playoffs, it's a disgrace. Well, that's not it at the end of the day. That's not all that matters. So I think that, maybe Mac Jones needs a year of development. Maybe Damian Harris needs another year before he is a type of running back that doesn't fumble in that situation. I don't know. But, I'm just throwing a little bit of caution to the wind here and saying, if you're expecting playoffs or bust, that might be expecting a little too much. You can, aspire to make the playoffs. You can hope the Patriots are a playoff team, but it's really no guarantee. I don't want to go too far with the rookie quarterback stuff because Mac Jones, I think, is really good. I think he's an upgrade from Cam Newton. I don't want to sit here and pretend that he's not. But I think that when you when you factor in the fact that he's still going to have some rookie mistakes, you have to, be accepting of that. And I don't think he had a lot today, but it could be coming. He could throw a few bad picks here or there. He could fumble in a situation because he's a rookie, and you have to work through that as a rookie. There are growing pains that come along with that. So I would also say that, as great as he was today, you can't expect that every week. And when you kind of consider the fact that he played so good today, I think, and I'm willing to go as far as so good. I don't want to say so great, but it was a really good debut. I feel like this was a game that you kind of had to win for that reason. So anyway, the Patriots' next game against the Jets, which should be an easy one, should be one that the Patriots are easily able to win, and I hope they do and they get back on track and 1-1. After that is the Saints, which a lot of people looked at as an easy game, or an easier game than relatively easy on the schedule. Jameis Winston just threw 5 touchdown passes today and looks amazing. So, and it looks like the guy that a lot of people thought the Buccaneers were getting with the first overall pick. So maybe Sean Payton's offense is perfect for him. He learned from a year behind Drew Brees, and now he's going to be a really good quarterback. Who knows? That could be totally wrong. Could be overreacting to 1 week, but he was pretty dang good today. So that's a concern now. After that, you go to the Texans, who won today, or the Buccaneers next after that, which we know doesn't look good. Texans after that, they won today. They're looking, things are looking up for them. Cowboys were really good against the Buccaneers in week 1. Then the Jets again, the Chargers who won today, the Panthers who won today, the Browns who won today. So I'm not going to act like all of a sudden the Patriots have a tough schedule, but I mean, just to say this, it doesn't look as good after week 1 as it did before week 1. So, I think that's something to monitor, at least. I see a Dolphins fan in the chat. I'm not going to bother bringing him up saying, let's go Fins. But if you guys want to drown that out with other things you want to throw out about the game, frustrations, by all means, we'll get to them, everything that you guys have to say in the show as well. But again, a tough and frustrating game for the Patriots. And it's tough to drop week 1 when you were that close. The Nick Folk thing was... It still feels weird to me. I almost don't. This is how I'll talk about the Nick Folk thing. I understand that he's a more accurate kicker and that you might want him in the situations they wanted him in. If you had came to me and said, you have a 30-yard field goal right now, you need someone to make it to save your life, who do you want to kick it, Nick Folk or Quinn Nordin? Sure, I'll take Nick Folk. But I think if you're having Quinn Nordin on the roster at all, you clearly want him to be part of your team going into the future. You clearly think he has some potential. You want to groom him, maybe make him your kicker for the next 10 years. I don't know. If you have a young kicker on your roster, that has to be the plan, right? So if that's the case, I think this was probably the wrong move. I mean, if you have a guy, kicking, so much of kicking and being a kicker is about confidence. You see guys getting their heads too much, and then they start to get the shakes and shank them. Like, you've seen the kickers in years past who have missed like 4 kicks in a game. It's not because they're that terrible. I think, who was it with? I don't know. I'm trying to think of just a few years ago it happened with some guy. And I'm totally spacing on who it is now. I think it happened in week 1 even. Was it Gostkowski? It might have even been Gostkowski last year with the Titans, where he missed, 3 kicks, 4 kicks week 1 on, I think it was Monday Night Football maybe, or Sunday Night Football, whatever it was. And it's not because Gostkowski is a 20% field goal kicker. It's because you get out of the rhythm and you start to not believe in yourself, and you get in your head too much, and you start shanking them left and right. So the idea of having Quinn Nordin on the roster and like giving him this confidence boost, like you're our starting kicker and all this stuff, and then bringing Nick Folk up and having him kick and having this kid sit on the bench, it's kind of like that has to be such a hit to his confidence. And then where is his headspace at? And I don't know that he's gonna I'm so befuddled by what the plan exactly is going to be this season. Like, is Quinn Nordin eventually going to take over? Is he going to just handle kicks of 50 yards plus? What is the point of all this? Either you believe in Quinn Nordin and you don't, and you're going to send him out there or you're not. And I just it's so confusing to me. I don't really understand the plan at all. One more decision I want to question, and I want to look this up as I go here, because I want to find the exact down and distance of it too. But the Patriots obviously opt to kick that field goal with Nick Folk. late, or I guess it was early in the fourth quarter at that point. And, they get the ball back and they get a chance to kick the field goal. So ultimately, I'm not going to say that this is somehow the wrong decision, because ultimately, if it was just about the decision making and Damian Harris didn't fumble, they might have won anyway. But I think that you can go back in retrospect and say that perhaps the Patriots should have gone for the touchdown there. So they kick the field goal at 5. Is this? Hold on, I got it right here. The Patriots end up kicking the field goal at the 10-minute mark of the fourth quarter. A 33-yard field goal. It was 4th and 4 at the Miami 15. They're in the red zone. And it was right after the Jacoby Myers drop. So Jacoby Myers, I don't want to call it too much of a drop. It was a little bit out of his reach. He probably could have hauled it in. But Mac Jones throws it a little far. If Jones doesn't overthrow him too much, he grabs it, goes in stride, and picks up the first down. And they got him on that for the broadcast. I thought it was good enough. Jacoby Myers could have hauled it in anyway. But either way, the Patriots end up in a 4th and 4. And I just feel like I don't want to say you have to go for it, but I think they should have gone for it. In that moment, I said, going for it's probably the right call here. And at the very least, you pin Miami back. And if they had, maybe they end up winning the game that way too. And maybe they don't have to worry about Damian Harris fumbling. So I think you can second guess that as well. I'm not going to go too far with it, because ultimately all the blame to me for this game, at least, 70, somewhere between 60 and 70% of it has to fall on the shoulders of Damian Harris, because that fumble was just so big in such a crucial moment, such an important spot of the field. I mean, it looked like they might even score a touchdown there. It really looked like they went smart and score a touchdown, game over. At the very least, you could have just, I say this jokingly, obviously you wouldn't do this, but you could have just kneed it and kicked the field goal, and you would have been better off. So, and I know that's, kind of an obvious trope, but it's so inexcusable to fumble in that situation. And the Patriots lost games in that fashion last season, and to lose it again like this, it's just really disappointing. Thomas saying, Mac, for you is a B+. What about everybody else? So I would say Mac. I'd say that's about an accurate grade. B+, A-, I think is fair for Mac Jones. To me, Ramondre Stevenson, if you want to throw him in there, he gets an F or an incomplete. He was, obviously with the one fumble. Damian Harris, I guess, because besides his long run, which was 35 yards, I think, start the game. First run of the game. Since then, he was 22 carries for 65 yards. So less than 3 yards a carry after that, which is just awful. And I don't want to disparage him too much, because at the end of the day, his stats are his stats, and he was over 4 yards a carry. But I'm not gonna sugarcoat it either. So after that first carry, 22 for 65 and a fumble, no touchdowns. I would say that if I was just grading past the first carry, it would probably be a D- to an F. The first carry might get him up to, I guess, a C-, D+ alone, just with the 35 yards. But it was bad. If you take out the first carry, it's probably an F for me. Like, that's the day Damian Harris had. And that's brutal to say. As far as everyone else is concerned, I'd give Nelson Aglor a solid B. I think Nelson Aglor was about, considerably above average, better than I expected in his first game. Jacoby Myers, C+. He had a good number of catches, had the drop on third down. I guess you can call it a drop. I don't know whether they did or not on the official stat sheet, but you could call it that. 644. So I don't think he was that special. James White, pretty solid B-. Jonnu Smith in his debut, C+. He made a few good catches. He had the fumble that they almost lost. Luckily, they were able to hold on to it, and I believe kick the field goal in that situation. Hunter Henry, C- probably. Kendrick Bourne, I'd probably give Kendrick Bourne an incomplete or a C. Like, he had the one catch. He also had another big catch that was called back because of a penalty. So I don't want to bash Kendrick Bourne too much. I think he was fine, I guess. But yeah, honestly, it wasn't great. It wasn't great today from anybody at all. And I think the defense as a whole, if I'm just grading the defense as a unit, I would probably give them a C or a C minus. And that might seem harsh because the Dolphins did only score 17 points, but I would have probably still liked a little bit more out of the defense than just the one interception, which felt like, I don't know. It was an important spot, but it felt like they just needed more throughout the rest of the day. Like Tua, I don't want to get too much on Tua because who knows, he could have a breakout year, but especially in training camp and going in, like it was starting to really look like he was a bust. And if that's the case, he didn't look like it today. Tua with the rushing touchdown, the passing one, the interception to go along with it. They just didn't make Tua look bad enough, and as bad as I was hoping they would make him look. If I had to say who had the better day between Mac and Tua, it's closer than I think a lot of fans would ascribe it to be, just because Tua had the rushing touchdown on top of that. He didn't do much in the running game. He didn't do anything else in the running game besides that. He had the 3 kneel downs, but I still think that overall, I thought he was better today. I thought if you flip the quarterbacks, that I don't know. It's close. I don't want to go too far with it because I'm not going to definitively say one or the other. I still think I'd take Mac Jones long term because Tua scares me, but it's closer with the rushing touchdown with Tua than I think people would want it to be. All right, Cal saying that I miss Sony Michel. I'll say this. I think that's crazy, but I understand why you're saying that, and it's understandable from the standpoint of you had 2 running backs today who were expected to be your primary ball carriers, James White, your pass catching back, and it looked like it was shaping up to be Ramondre Stevenson and Damian Harris as your power backs, or your typical, your primary ball carriers. And both of them fumble. And this is what happens when you have 2 running backs that are young and youthful and whatever, and you're relying on this season, that both fumble and cause you to lose by 1 point, is people start saying stuff like, I miss Sony Michel, which is crazy talk. It's crazy talk. But this is what happens when you fall in situations like that and you lose games like this. People start to think that Sony Michel would have been better. Sony Michel probably would have fumbled too, but I don't blame him for thinking this way, because I'm sure he wishes he had Sony Michel. I wish I had anyone else, any other running back that wouldn't have fumbled in that spot. So besides the first carry, I would have taken a million running backs over Damian Harris today. So it wasn't great. And then NJ saying that Harris fumble, man, and that was it. That was the whole game. And again, you can blame the defense. You can blame, I don't know, I guess Jacoby Myers drop if you want. You can say Belichick should have gone for it on 4th and 4 like I did. You can say Ramondre Stevenson fumbled, all this other stuff. You want to throw out there, go for it. But to me, it's still like 70% of the blame for this loss is Damian Harris's fumble. Because that moment alone, you change just that moment about the game, your chances of winning go up about 70%, I would say. So, just brutal. And then Cal saying no Gilmore today, pointing out no Gilmore is just not good. I'm not guessing not acceptable, whatever it is. Again, I said this off the top of the stream, and I'll say it again. If you have Stephon Gilmore today, you probably win this game. It's hard for me to imagine you don't. So very unfortunate that he's not with the team right now and not going to be with the team for the next 5 weeks. So as much as we say, yes, the team needs Gilmore, too bad for at least the next 5 weeks. And guess what? When you play Tom Brady or you play this is going to sound crazy at this point, but I'm going to throw him on the list, Jameis Winston, or even Dak Prescott, who you're going to play in the first 6 weeks, you would love to have Stephon Gilmore. You're not going to. So Jameis Winston, Tom Brady, Dak Prescott. One of these things may not be like the other, but Jameis Winston looks pretty good so far. You're not going to have Stephon Gilmore for any of those guys. Definitive. No way. No chance. And that's very, very unfortunate. And even today, we're talking about the quarterbacks that I think are good at least. I don't think Tua is good. Even you could have used him today against Tua. You lost today, maybe not because you didn't have Stephon Gilmore, but you would have won with him. and you're facing Tua. So, I mean, Zach Wilson, you're playing in that stretch. Tyrod Taylor, like, I don't think they're good quarterbacks. But are you going to lose by 1 point again? Like, I hope not. I think that, this was a key. If you thought the Patriots were going to make the playoffs, this was one of the wins you probably mapped out. Because if you're kind of going through the schedule, I would say that if you kind of have to mark the Buccaneers as a probable loss. Probably at least one Bills game is a probable loss. And then there's, a handful of toss-ups. The other Bills game is probably a toss-up. The Titans game, the Titans didn't play well today. There's probably a toss-up, though. Browns, Chargers, obviously the Cowboys, the Saints. So there's a number of toss-ups in that situation. I think that maybe this was at that group as well. They should still have a path to the playoffs, not to already start doing this talk. But this was one you would love to win. It's always good to win week 1. I think that there's got to be like statistics. I know there's much worse statistics on teams finishing 0-2. So next week is a must win. To as far as making the playoffs, or I don't want to say must win because that's a little early. But teams that start 0-2 rarely make the playoffs. So the fact that if you were in that situation, you'd be in dire straits. If you start 0-1, let's see here if we can find this. Well, it's a little different now because it's not a 12-team playoff anymore. It's a 14-team playoff. So the math will be a little bit different. But let's see if I can. I'm looking through this whole article. It's not telling me exactly what it is. 13% of 0-2 teams make the playoffs. So you want to up that and say it's like 20. Then maybe you can make an argument that, hey, the Patriots should have a real chance. Like they still have a chance, but your chances plummet basically if you lose next week, which they shouldn't because it's the Jets. But it's at least something to think about. I don't know if there's a percentage on 0-1 teams making the playoffs. If someone can find that and drop that in the chat, let me know. But yeah, I would assume it's probably around 50-50. I would assume it falls somewhere around that. I guess probably somewhere a bit under that. But yeah, it's not typically it's just not a good sign. You want to start the season off on a good note. So anyway, Cal saying that amazing Jameis might tear up Mills. That eye surgery did wonders. And yeah, I'll just be completely transparent with you guys right now. And not to go into too much of story time, but I run a fantasy, or I have a fantasy team, and I was going to just stream defenses, and I looked at the defense rankings for week 1 on this website, which I'll never go to again. I'm going to find out the name of it, and I'm never going to go to it again. And it had the Packers like 6th or 7th, and it said Jameis Winston throws a lot of picks, and he's the Saints quarterback, and they don't have all these guys, so they don't have Michael Thomas, I guess, and their wide receivers are questionable. So go ahead and start the Packers defense. Stream them like they're the 7th or 6th ranked defense, and I'm in a 12-team league, so I was like, okay. That sounds good to me. Like, all right, yeah, sure, I guess. When I could have started the Panthers defense, and I should have just started the Panthers defense. I should have just done that. But I started the Packers defense, and Jameis Winston tears them up, and they get -3. And I was like, what? Why? So I was monitoring the Jameis Winston stuff, and yeah, Cal, you're right. He was good, man. He was really good today, Jameis Winston. And it should scare you. For the one game, if you're rooting for Tom Brady Buccaneers, I don't know. Should it scare you that much? I don't know. But guess what? Jameis Winston might actually be good. Jameis Winston could actually live up to his number 1 pick status yet. Because he was really good today. And the whole idea with Jameis Winston was the tutelage of Drew Brees and Sean Payton and a good organization and all these things coming together and the eye surgery, throw the eye surgery on the list. And it might have worked. I know it sounds crazy, but it might have actually worked. And Jameis Winston might be good now. Well, I don't know. It's just 1 week. Week 2's ahead. He's going to play the Patriots week 3. I'm going to be at that game, so I don't know what the post-game setup is going to be that week, but I'll actually be at Patriots Saints to see it in person. So I don't know. But I'm a lot more scared about that game now than I was 4 hours ago. Bill said this now that we got better. Bill said this right after the game, because I don't even think that's a Bill Belichick answer. I think to lose and say we got better, that's kind of Why is that what you're talking about right now? That oh yeah, we lost, we got better. I don't know. That's silly to me. That's crazy that you would that's what he would come out and say. Edwards saying we need a number one receiver. And yeah, you do. You do need a number one receiver. I would say that I was kind of disappointed they didn't, and this guy didn't play very well today either. But I was a little disappointed they didn't go harder after Kenny Golladay. I thought that would have been your number one receiver. And Edward, what's even more frustrating about that is that they kind of decided, well, we don't need a number one wide receiver because they had these two tight ends, and then they don't use the two tight ends enough today. And you're thinking, like, I thought that was the plan. I thought that was the whole reason you didn't need a number one wide receiver is because you paid number one receiver money to two tight ends. And they, that they just didn't, they didn't end up running it that way. And that's really, really frustrating, and that's not what they should have done. I want to read some other Belichick quotes today, too. I don't know if that one was real, but I just looked it up. We did some good things. In the end, it wasn't enough. We just have to do a better job. We made some good plays. We just didn't make enough of them. That's a non-answer. I mean, it's just, we did some good things. It wasn't enough. We made some good plays. We just didn't make enough. Like, what? It's just, I know I'm not expecting much from Belichick press conferences, but it's frustrating to, he said disappointing games, didn't do enough to win. Like all this pretty cliche stuff. So nothing very interesting for Belichick today, as per usual. And Edward saying, I think we win today if Cam had started. That's an interesting point, Edward. Cam actually had a really good game against the Dolphins last year. So maybe. But Mac Jones also played really well. So is this it's really Damian Harris's fault. So if you're saying that they would have won because Cam Newton started, then it's not for anything the quarterback actually did. It's just because you think their game plan would have been different, because Mac Jones was really good. So I don't think Cam Newton would have played better than Mac Jones did today. I certainly don't think that. Maybe their game plan is different. Maybe they don't hand Damian Harris the ball there. But does Cam Newton keep it and fumble himself? Like, I don't know. I would probably push back against that, Edward. Kenny saying Jonnu Smith, tight end 1. Mac looks great. Where is Barmore? Well, the Patriots are known to be hesitant with rookies, not with Mac Jones, but with most rookies. So Barmore, maybe they're holding him back a little bit. As far as Jonnu Smith, yeah, again, you needed more from him and Hunter Henry today. It's that simple. You really needed more from both those guys. Saying Mac 29-30 mine. I mean, what would Cam have done? Exactly what I said, Kenny. Cam would have been running it and Prob not fumbled. Again, Edward, I don't know if you were here, but I said this at the beginning of the stream. This game reminded me of the Bills loss last year where Cam did fumble. So we've already seen Cam fumble at the end of the game. And would they have just done, QB keepers there? Like, I don't know. They probably would have just still handed the ball off. It's not like because you have Cam Newton, you don't hand the ball off still. So I don't know, Edward. I disagree. I think they were better off with Mac. And Kenny putting up Mac's QB rating today, 102.6. Mac was good, guys. Mac was really good today. Patriots just didn't do enough to get him to win. All right, guys. I think that's going to do it for this episode. I hate the depressing factor that it had to be with a loss, but we'll get on some wins and we'll do some good stuff. And maybe we'll have midweek streams. I was thinking about whether we're going to do that periodically. I've had some people ask whether midweek streams will be a thing because we did one last week. So maybe we'll get into that. It could be fun. I don't know. Maybe it's just a sometimes thing. We'll figure it out. But I appreciate you guys all coming out today, tuning in for the first stream. Come back for the next one. And I was always interact with the chat. I love interacting with you guys in the chat. And I know Ev has a great thing going with his Celtics post games. And I love to do it here with the Patriots post games as well, and just have a good time with you guys. And not so much when they lose, but even if they lose, we can figure stuff out. Especially once the streams start to break down, we're just talking. It can get more fun. So anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate it. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Follow me on Twitter @ByKJDoyle. So thanks, everybody. And we'll see you next week after the Jets game, which should be our first win. Should be the first win of the season. Fingers crossed. Knock on whatever wood I have here. Just making sure I don't jinx it. But hopefully next week we'll be talking after a win.